We're going to talk about the prison industrial complex and really the people who are impacted the most by our prison policies. In the United States, in case you don't live here, because I know we have a few international people who live overseas or right above in Canada, if you're in jail, you lose the privilege to vote. And that's, sadly, the United States is the most heavily incarcerated, has the most heavily incarcerated population in the free world. We have more prisons and schools, and it's really impacting a lot of communities, and it prohibits people to be actively involved in our political system. And Senator Bernie Sanders seems to be leading the charge in changing that narrative. So, Daniel, what's going on?
So this ties right into the previous story that we did about reparations and the systemic change that's required. This is a systemic change. This makes things different because right now, actually with the exception of Vermont and Maine, if you're in prison, you lose your right to vote, and in a majority, or let's see, in 22 states, you lose your right to vote after you get out of prison as well, and then in other states, you just permanently lose your right to vote. There's I remember when Rick Scott was in charge of Florida, he would oversee a board that people that had felony convictions, the only place that they can go to get their right to vote back, and he would just kind of laugh at them and piss off, even if they reform their life, they own a small business, they employ people, haha, you don't get to vote, you don't matter. And of course we know which groups that this specifically affects the most. So with this, Sanders was at a town hall and he was asked about this, and he said, again, since it is his own state, I'm sure it's something to do with that, where if you're in jail, you can still vote. He said, yeah, if you're in jail, you've done something terrible, but you shouldn't lose what it means to be a citizen in a democracy, and you should be able to vote. So he has argued that, remember, 1% of Americans are in prison. That's a pretty big voting bloc, except they can't vote. And so politicians don't care about them. So if you're in prison, no one cares about you. Politicians don't care about you. The system doesn't care about you because you have no value. But if prisoners had the right to vote, well, perhaps there might be some better conditions coming along because now they're a voting bloc, and they probably don't have a lot else to do but vote on voting day. So I think this is very good. I think this is a good step that we should be doing. Everyone should, you're a citizen, you should be able to vote, no matter what your circumstances.
There's something else I want to add on to this. Look, we always talk on this show that, look, no one's perfect. The people who we were 10 years ago are not the people who we are now. We all change, and some of us start off bad, and we make an effort to be better. I mean, that's the whole idea of the human journey.
That's
to be
the definition
better.
Of progress.
Yes, and the thing is, look, we have crazy criminal laws here in this country, and the most people who are impacted by it the most are the victims of the war on drugs. You have individuals who are holding a bag of cannabis. They're sentenced to jail for either 10 to 20 years, and then when they get out, they lose a lot of privilege. Time goes on without them, and they lose the privilege to vote. And granted, there are other people who do get out early, serving 5 years. I mean, look, again, sentencing is different for every individual, but for the individuals who get out and can still have time to reform themselves, they're up against a huge mountain of
you lose about
laws.
3,000 rights when you were a felon.
And the problem is that what if that person changes their life around? I mean, you're losing potential. You're losing a chance for someone to contribute to society. And you know what? Their vote matters because maybe they do want to get politically involved. Maybe they want to make sure no one else gets put into the system that they're put in. And maybe they hear a candidate or a politician that's talking about fixing schools, fixing the community, making better jobs, more livable wages, a better infrastructure, better healthcare plan, and they say, well, that's somebody who I like to support, but then all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, they can't vote. Does that sound like a democracy to you?
Right.
I mean, we just can't throw people away just because they made a mistake. Now, look, there are individuals who do commit crime like murder or rape, and look, please keep them away from society, or at least somehow try and rehabilitate them. There we go.
That's the word.
That's the word. But I mean, for those individuals who are at least are the victims of the war on drugs for holding bags of cannabis, give them another chance. Let them have a chance to reform, because you have people in jail for committing crimes that don't really hurt anybody. Right. And it's ridiculous. So Paul, go ahead.
Your core point there is excellent, and that is if you are in prison for a crime that you don't think should be a crime, that you're morally opposed to, how are you then able to vote to put someone in power to get rid of that law or to change that law? The other point that I really wanted to make is when we were talking about this story before we came on the air, sort of engaged in a thought experiment of, well, okay, is there any circumstance by which the right to vote should be removed from someone? Right? Is there any circumstance by which, and so I thought, well, okay, well, you know, clinically insane. Well, that's problematic because, you know, what if someone is declared insane that later it turns out that they aren't? There are cases of that happening,
and that's happened before in the past.
Right. And I think what we've come to is, no matter what metric you say is, well, this is a specific corner case where we shouldn't allow this person to vote. That can often be expanded and used nefariously to prevent other people to vote. So I think the principled position should be all citizens of a country of voting age are allowed to vote, regardless of past conviction records or past felony status or anything. There should be no reason that you should remove someone's right to vote.
I want to add more onto that. I mean, look, the minute you say that this one group or set individuals or people who politically think different than you do not have the right to vote, you are contributing to the death of democracy.
Right, that's voter suppression.
Yeah, because the idea of democracy is that everyone gets involved. Now, look, you're always going to run into people that you will disagree with and who has different political opinions than you. Look, we've interviewed a lot of people on the show in the past, from socialists, Greens, Democrats, and even the libertarians. But never would I support an idea that none of them should have the right to vote. And same thing for prisoners, too. And especially, look, you know our opinion was the war on drugs. It's a ridiculous war. Prohibition never works. And you have the majority of the prison population are impacted by that war. They should have a right to vote and actually be asked really what they think about the war on drugs, and the ridiculous times that they're serving in jail. We need to hear their voices. Who knows who we're losing in regards to what they can contribute to society. Give them a chance to rehabilitate themselves. There we go, and to contribute in society and be a part of the democratic process. This is what the whole idea of America is about, right? This is what the whole revolution was about, so that people can make themselves better. No one's going to be perfect. Everyone has made mistakes, but that doesn't mean that we should not deny them the chance to have a second opportunity to make their lives better and also contribute to a better society.
Yeah,
Daniel.
I just want to add on to this that, you know, America has so many people in jail. I mean, it's millions of people.
We're number one.
We're number one. Millions of people don't have rights that other people have. I mean, this isn't what we're discussing is a joke in other nations. They would say, "Are you serious?" I think someone even commented earlier in chat. I thought it was a joke when I first heard you couldn't vote if you were in jail. Exactly. So
welcome to the United States.
Get to that point. So we wind up. Go back to the system that makes this happen. You are in an area that doesn't have jobs, where youth unemployment is 50%, no one's investing in you, politicians don't care about you, your money's being extracted from your area, there's really no place you can go to vote, your school is terrible, so it's very hard to learn, you're also very hungry when you go to school since your parents can't bring in enough money at their minimum wage jobs to feed you, so to supplement your income, you join a gang, or because you feel threatened, you join a gang, and then you get into that in many ways because that's the only option you had. You then get arrested for carrying cannabis. You're now also a gang member, which has a terrible stigma. We've scarlet lettered the entire idea of what it means to be a criminal. We take people that are in circumstances, for the most part, that are beyond their control, and we treat them as if they've chosen every step along the way, and then blame them and dehumanize them and treat them like animals for those situations. So then we as a population can sit back and say, just keep them away from me. I don't care about them. Get them out of here. Get them out of my town, not in my backyard. And so they get shipped away to someplace where they're not growing at all. We've taken away all the educational aspects of school that used to be in jail to actually rehabilitate, because since the war on drugs has happened, since we have this way that we've looked at the police for the past 30 or 40 years, it happens, the obvious inputs of the system and the laws lead to obvious outputs. So now we have a private prison system that makes money off of slave labor at a population larger than the actual number of slaves in America and pays them a nickel an hour, puts them on fire brigades because California doesn't want to have to pay to have people carry around hoses, and they'll do it because it's so terrible in prison that the fresh air and maybe dying of fire is better by comparison. But remember, when you get out of jail, you're a felon, so you can't get that EMT license you need to be a firefighter, which you now have experience for. This is the systemic destruction that causes people that go into jail to become worse when it should be a system like in Europe and Norway, as an example, where we try to make people better and bring them back into the productive area of society. We don't penalize them after they get out. When they
I don't think anyone can reasonably make the argument that the American prison system is rehabilitative in nature.
No,
I don't think you can.
No,
it is entirely 100% punitive.
And there's another thing too.
And exploitative.
And there's another thing too that I want to let our international audience know. Just so you know, the prison industrial complex has a lot of influence in Washington, D.C., thanks to Citizens United, because let's face it, these prison industrial complexes are businesses and corporations are people, and money is speech. And so to our national audience, if you want to do something about it, let's actually talk about getting money out of politics. Now, there's a few organizations doing that. Wolfpack represent us, but I mean, if we're going to have a fair democracy, if we want to get rid of all the lobby groups, including the prison industrial complex, we've got to get rid of Citizens United and the McCutcheon's decision. And this was brought to you by the geniuses in the Supreme Court. So this is why we have this fucked up system in the first place, and we got to get rid of the war on drugs. And at least kudos to Bernie Sanders for at least stepping up and saying, like, look, give these prisoners the chance to vote. People have a right to change themselves, and if they're going to make themselves better, give them a chance and let them have the privilege to vote. This is what this whole country's about, right? Or am I wrong?
Taxation without representation.
Here's the question that we have. Do we believe in the idea of progress in this country? If we don't, then the system that we have should be quite adequate, where people that are bad are always bad, and people that are good are only good until they're bad. If we want to look at things in a medieval landscape, let's just get a time machine and send us back to Europe with serfdom, where people were slaves to the land. This is backwards, ancient, backwards thinking that doesn't hold water. It doesn't believe in the idea of human progress.
Yeah. Hey, did you like that video? Hit the subscribe button, hit that thumbs up icon, and also hit that ring bell notification so that way you guys know when we have more content up on the Hardlens Media YouTube channel. But Paul, what else can people do to help us out?
Keep watching.